everyone. Welcome to Being Patient Brain Talks. I'm Deborah Kahn, founder of Being Patient. As all of you know, we are lucky enough on occasion to have Teepa Snow, caregiver advisor extraordinaire, as I always introduce her. Teepa's been an amazing resource for so many people who have loved ones with dementia and has graced us with some of her time. So welcome again, Teepa.
Always. It's so much fun to come and spend some time with you. And I would say I'm the caregiver or care partner who's not afraid to go in the bathroom
Well,
or the
I'm glad you
bedroom or
started
the
there.
car or the
I
kitchen,
am
wherever
I
we need to
am
go.
super happy you've started there because selfishly, I'm going to start with my own family. And, as we know, dementia is a journey and needs change as you kind of move through this. I've come to you before with tips for how to bathe and how to shower when that's getting difficult. And you've given us some great advice, but I hate to say it, it's not working anymore.
Yeah.
The patients, the make sure they're warm, give them dignity.
Yep.
And it literally sounds like someone's being murdered when my
Yeah.
mom is in the bath now. And it's gotten to the point where her wonderful caregivers just have to do it, and that's it. So, do you have any advice?
Ooh. Well, one of the challenges with we just have to do it, we keep thinking, okay, well, they'll get used to it. And the answer is, yeah, no, they won't. Because what they're experiencing is a sensory overload. And for those of us who without dementia, it's really hard to imagine being overloaded simply by having water on you and, having somebody help you get clean. I mean, it's like, yeah, it's embarrassing, but once we go through it a few times, it's like, oh yeah, like it was like in junior high when you learned how to take a shower with all the other girls, and it was like, oh, all right, fine. Ooh, I don't like my body. That's not what this is about. This is truly about feeling overwhelmed with the sensations of air and water and touching and I hate it, and it's bringing up feelings of intense distress and the more it happens, the more I start anticipating as soon as we go in that space, as soon as we start that activity, it is like overwhelming. So, one of the first things to really recognize is where are the real important places to get clean? So, if you had to pick where are your important places, where are they? Where do you think? Yeah. So, Deb, so I'm going to call on you to think about your human body and where are really important places to get clean. If you had to get them clean and you had to pick just a few, where would they be?
Under your arms,
Good one.
your behind,
Yeah, your back end. Yep,
your
yep, the
back
back.
end.
Yep.
Um, yeah, I
Your
mean, to
private
me,
front, your private
private
front.
front. Oh, I was kind of categorizing that in the same area, but yes.
No, that's a very
Oh,
different experience because you have
oh,
a whole different set of sensory receivers in the private front than you do in the back end. Turns out the back end is a lot more tolerable for a lot of people because you have fewer sensory. So if you're going to start something, sometimes starting in the back end and then saying to them, you do your front, you do it, and then pass off the cloth. Often people can do their front once you've done the back side. So sometimes giving control back after you touch the thigh with the washcloth, then say, here, you do it, and pass the washcloth to them. I have had more success with getting people to actually clean their private front, but I have to take care of the private back
yeah.
because the private back, it's just not doable. Under the boobs for women, that's another real important space. Um, and the toes, the front of your foot, because you'll get a lot of buildup of dead tissue. And then it turns out your hands, really important to get your hands clean. But let's really seriously look at, okay, so those are the main things. And actually, the skin in between, it's getting dry, it's getting old, it's getting thin. I mean, having to clean it a lot, not often. But what we do need is these parts do need to get cleaned pretty regularly. Well, where can you clean them that isn't a bathroom?
So are you suggesting maybe we move to like a sponge bath and not like turning on the shower? Because once you turn on the shower,
Sure.
that's when a lot of the screaming begins, right?
You got it. Yeah, so I'll take the sink. So it's like, could you help me wring these rags out? So I'm giving you a task to do here. We need to really wash these rags. We need to soap them up and we need to rinse them so that we can wring them out. Okay, now let's rinse them. Okay, good. Now, by the time I'm done doing that, I can have hands and even nails pretty clean. And then I could say, you know what? Here, go ahead and do your pits while you're here. And I can actually often get people to do pits with an overshirt on and just get in there and get the pit really well, even with a bra on. So I don't try to strip people down as it is to get to those really important places. And then when it gets wet, I'll say, tell you what, why don't we unfasten that? And then you can just take it off. Here, go ahead and clean up under, and then you're good to go. So it becomes more of a step by step process versus we're going to do this whole body thing that gets overwhelming. And I can get people maybe to soak their feet or to get their feet wrapped in a nice, wet, juicy, moist towel that's nice and warm around their feet. And then I can get their feet clean sitting down somewhere. So I'm not worried about them falling. They're not worried about slipping. So I start to really break the task down into how do I get the high spots that need to be gotten? And then how can I do the hair, the head? Is that something that if I put a cloth here and tip, maybe that I can get it? Or is it something that we go to the beauty parlor to do if that's still a habit that maybe I can get somebody to do? Or how do
Mhm.
we look at getting hair done as a separate activity from this bathing of the body? But I think we have to get to a new space in our own head about this is no longer something that the person finds even tolerable. I mean, it's not even tolerable, let alone enjoyable.
Yeah, it's really hard to see because,
Yeah, it is.
my mom
Listen
is
to.
such a neat, clean freak, right? And so like just like I know you can't think that way, but it's like it's really hard to see for that reason. It's just like,
It's really hard to let go of what we think would be best to recognize what is best for that person in the moment is for us to let go of that piece because that's no longer the piece that's there for them. Um, and and what we're doing is sort of a torture
yeah.
in the worst. I mean, and we don't mean it that way. We're so trying to help.
Yeah, and I mean, we're blessed with wonderful caregivers, but
Yeah,
I feel for them because it's really, I mean, I've been over there and I've literally taken off my clothes and gotten in the shower with her just so that she might feel more comfortable if she sees me, right? But
yeah. It's
it's
not working so much anymore.
yes,
Yeah.
it's not.
We just
Heidi
don't want to
had,
do it. I mean, it's not embarrassment. It's not anything like that. It's just sensory. It's just too much. And
yeah.
it's hard for us to believe, but when your brain is starting to be damaged in the sensory motor area, then you can't discern what's a reasonable experience and what's one that feels scary and intense. And there's no sorting it all out anymore. It's really frustrating.
So we have a question that's a follow-up to this from Heidi, who's watching, and she's asking, related to this current topic, my father has fallen several times in the bathroom and has severe anxiety about being in the space in general. He's also at the onset of incontinence, so there is the challenge. He is never to shower alone and is on a shower schedule with his facility, but all the other things that happen in this room beyond the shower are so scary and so full of anxiety for him.
And what I would add is if we aren't really careful really soon, what will start to happen is you've seen the picture of the cat with their hands like the claws and the feet, like that's how he'll start to view this space because entering that space is traumatizing. It creates trauma for him. And it's traumatizing on two fronts. Number one, we force him into the space. And number two, he has memory of significant loss of control in that space and loss of control in terms of not feeling comfortable being naked in front of other people, perhaps, but more importantly, loss of balance and loss of body control in a space. And so I don't want to go in that space anymore. And now I'm starting to experience loss of urine control. And now it's even, I'm not going in there. That's how that happens. And so instead, males, particularly at high risk for going over to trash cans or corners or windows or open containers or closets or drawers. And you're just thinking, what are you doing? Well, I'm trying to find a safe place to pee, frankly. And I know enough to know I need to go, but I'm no longer skilled enough to realize, and you're supposed to go in the bathroom. I'm just supposed to put it somewhere. And so I don't just let it happen. I take myself somewhere and put it somewhere. But it's not the place anybody wants me to put it.
So, actually, another. Oh, sorry, Teepa. I didn't mean to cut you off.
The only thing I was going to add, and so the sooner we acknowledge, boy, that shower thing we got to call a halt to that, and we've got to figure out how to be okay with washing up. We want to try to preserve that room as a room that doesn't create drama and trauma. Maybe closing the curtains, covering up that opening, making it be non-existent, because we'd still like to be able to use the toilet for bowel movements and for peeing, perhaps. Otherwise, I may be looking at having to use a bedside commode, like bringing out a commode so he can sit and he can do his business. But now we can't use that room at all because it's such a drama center, which means I have to figure out mouth care and face care. And I mean, it makes life more challenging if we create drama in the bathroom.
Is incontinence eventually just part of this disease? Is that just a normal stage of dementia?
Yeah, because when we lose the control over fine skill, and so it's when we would lose the skill of fine dexterity. So you're finding that buttoning buttons and zipping zippers and the ability to grind and chew meat very carefully and being able to nip off and chew and very carefully swallow things, and the ability to use my eyes to do complex fine motor skills is deteriorating. That's generally where we start to see accidents happening. And at first it's just, whoa, because it is a complex system. The stretch of your bladder causes the nerves in your bladder to stretch. And when that happens, there's a signal that goes to the brain that says, ooh, this is filling. There's a second messaging system that goes to the sphincter that has to say, tighten up sphincter, stay relaxed bladder, but let's get to a place where you can get rid of this. And so the override cognitive is stay tight sphincter, stay relaxed bladder, and go to the bathroom. Now you have to then get there, and now still before you're allowed to do anything, you have to disrobe yourself. So you've got to get to the right place, get your clothing off, and then and only then do you let this go and squeeze that. And those are opposite neurological reactions that have to occur one right after the other. So with dementia, that no longer works. And so we may have a squeezing bladder early on. Oh, I got to, oh dear, oh my. And so there could be a lot of anxiety in that. I know that it's squeezing and I can't get it to stop. Now my anxiety actually makes it squeeze harder. My poor little sphincter is going, hold on. Or I don't realize it and it let go a little bit. And now it's like, oh dear, well, that's not good. I'm fine. Nothing happened.
Is it okay just to put an adult diaper on and just not have that worry anymore?
You can try that. Most individuals go through a period of time where they're still trying to control their bladder. And so what's really important is we provide those opportunities. And so, oh, hey, Deb, let's go. You got something. I don't know if you noticed it, like here, come look in the mirror. And while we're there, I'll say, hey, Deb, why don't you go ahead and try to go? Because we're going to head out. So what did I do? Let's be real clear about this. What I took into account in my mature brain. I recognize that it was about that time. It's been long enough. There's a pattern for you. I said, there's a reason to go to that room that had nothing to do with the bathroom. because I don't want to alert your brain that you need to pee, because what could start happening is you slip and you start to have that phenomena. Now, once we're there and the visual cue is there, I'll say, hey, why don't you go ahead and try? Not you need to go, it's time to go. It's just why don't you try? Because often when you get into that position, your brain will go, oh, time for release. Okay, got it. So I'm using old habits and structures to try to keep it going for as long as possible. I also want to watch for signals that you're getting stressed or distressed, which could signal as well you have a UTI on top of this issue coming on, because you've been holding on to urine because you don't want to make a mistake. Some people stop drinking so much because they're afraid they'll lose control, which is a bad idea. So it's complicated. So just putting a brief on is unfortunately typically not going to be super successful. What I would think about is the new underwear that they have that are leak proof, to buy you some time. I mean, because that, for a starter, gives me a heads up. Oh boy, we're starting to have episodes. Let me see when we're having the episodes. Then I can look and see and go, okay, so now I know something. So it's managing, we support continence and then we start managing incontinence. So it's a combo.
We had somebody write into us earlier, and on a different, I'm moving on now to a different topic, but this person is in North Carolina and wanted to ask about what should caregivers and people with dementia do, given the hurricane right now. Like, how do you navigate dementia and change in stressful situations, delays in resources? I think there's two things going on, and I think this is a really great, timely question. Maybe a hurricane is, it's relevant right now, but there can be other
There's
situations.
all kinds of like loss
Yeah.
of power in the wintertime. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
so this,
what is the best way to navigate through that when you're trying to look out after your loved one, but yet there's kind of a crisis that's going on, and it might be that there's chaos surrounding you?
yeah, one of the very first times I ever experienced that was when at 9/11, and I was in a geropsych military site during that event, and everybody wanted to watch the event, and we had to time out. What we would do is we'd rotate people. So what you need is you do need respite, so you, the carer, can go find out what's going on and you can deal with what you need to. But then when you come back into the presence of the person living with, you got to let go of all that. You want to pause at the door before you get in there, do your deep breaths, recenter yourself, come up with 3 things that you can think of that you could talk about or do that have nothing to do with this. But that means you have to have done a little prep. So I got to have some props. I got to have some cues. I've got to have some resources, like what music, what kind of topics, a magazine or something to do. Do I need to bring poker chips or do I need to bring cards or both? What could I pull together here in this very limited resource area? Could I ask somebody to, do we have scissors? I don't know. Can we just cut strips of paper? Could we cut strips of fabric? I'm trying to come up with what can we do that's repetitive? What can we do that's going to occupy a lot of brain space and eye space and ear space, and hand space? I've got to figure out how to engage somebody and myself, when at the same time I'm also in the back of my head trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to make it through the night if we run out of gas for the generator? Okay, who can I call? And that has to be like, whoa, got to figure that out, but you got to keep it chill, because the person living with will really start picking up on that stress level and watching over and over and over the distress stuff that's going on.
Right. I mean, what you point out is like remain calm and distraction, right? Those two ingredients to
Engagement.
navigate.
We need to engage somebody. We got to get them engaged.
Okay. Jennifer is asking, can you give some suggestions for activities to pass the time for people in mid-stage dementia? We're not at the late stage. We're kind of in that middle stage, which can last a really long time. That's a very long stage, middle stage dementia.
It is a really long stage, and there's a lot of variability there. One thing I'll do is, oh, hey, Deb, I could use your help. Now, I am trying to remember animals that I've seen at the zoo. And, right away, I was thinking of striped animal. I mean, there was a striped animal. It was in the African exhibit. Shoot, what was the name of that? What do they call those? They're not horses, they're like horses. What is that? What's that called? Is it, so Deb, is it, can you help me out there? Is it a,
Zebra,
you
perhaps?
got it? Nice. Yeah, that's it. All right, now, but then there's the ones that there's some that run with the zebras, but they're faster. They're a whole lot faster.
Okay, so
And
I
so,
get what you're doing here. You are engaging so that people feel successful about the answers. So then they're more incentivized to participate, right?
right. And I'm using what you have left, which is if I can give you a whole lot of support, you can, if I give you a lot of talk around the word, you can often, look, I found it. And it was like, sure enough, you did. Good. And then I take you down that road a little bit further now. And so I'm displaying like I can't think of the, which is what their challenge is, but I'm taking on the responsibility of being the one who can't quite hold on to it. So they get to be my helper. So let's think of other places where they get to save me, they get to help me, they get to be better, they get to be smart. So I will say, will you come look at this with me? I feel like this is not as straight as it should be. I could really use your help. So look at this picture and I'm going to move it and you tell me when you feel like it's just right. So often I'll use things that people can look at. People can move around. People can think about, but it stays simple. It's like, now I was going to bake a cake. Now I have a question for you. Do you think I should make 2 layers or just 1 layer and put icing on? What's your opinion about that?
Mhm.
I could use your help. What we're going to do is we're going to get some things out so I know what to do next. Now I have a recipe. So let's look at the first line of the recipe. It says that I need a cup of, does that say butter or does that say something else? I think it says butter. Say butter? Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, now I'm going to find that. Let's see, I have it in the door. Oh, it's in the door of the refrigerator. Let's go see if we can't find it. So what I'm doing is not only having them look at something, now I'm having them engage with me. I'll say, here, could you get that wrapper off for me? Perfect.
So, I mean, what I love about this is you could actually incorporate this into your daily activities, right? And so you're involving the person, you're making them feel validated, and you're making them feel like they're helpful, which is a big piece of
Yeah.
this, right?
And so now here's your alert. As they take the wrapper off the butter, if they start to do this, you have to be ready for that, not in a way,
Yeah, like,
but you go,
no, you're
oh,
not
hey,
doing
Dad.
it right. Yeah, you
Oh,
have
hey,
to
Dad,
say,
tell you what, put that in the bowl for me. Yep. You know what? That is going to taste better once we add the other parts. All right. So now we need to go get the sugar. I mean, but this, you got to use your brain. But at the same time, because I am doing something that I find purposeful, I can stay engaged better.
okay, so
If,
I actually, this is a good time
yeah,
to bring this up. From interviewing so many people diagnosed, one of the things, it used to be that neurologists would say, oh, an Alzheimer's brain stops learning. And I don't believe that anymore. And the reason why I don't believe that is because now we have seen so many stories of people flourishing with creativity. So I'm thinking of people like Rebecca Chop, who she was a 3-time university president, diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and then unleashed this beautiful painter from within. And I was like, Rebecca, did you have any artists in your family? She's like, no, not at all. Right. And so she's developed a part of her brain that she didn't even know existed. And that's with a diagnosis. And so to
yeah,
me, why is that? And I say it with my own mom, her caregivers have her color. Coloring is very calming for her. She just gets
yeah.
very calm. So, talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So
Why?
neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is this phenomena that we think stops when neurodegeneration starts. It doesn't. So people living with use what's left. And sometimes what's left are these creative opportunities, and it's often on the opposite side of the brain. So artistic endeavors tend to be over on the right-hand side as opposed to the language activities, which are over on the left, and the calculation and all the detail. And so all of a sudden, this ability to sing, to dance, to create, this willingness to take a risk. Now, some people aren't, some are very detail oriented. So I will show you behind me. This is called Zentangle. And somebody created that for me. And it's highly intense and yet great pleasure out of doing that. And I will tell you that for me, at this where I'm at in my life, I would I would tear the paper up. I would be no way. But who knows if and when my brain starts changing and I start losing some of the focus and the detail that I have over here, what I might do over there. And so I think recognizing, wow, the new level of creativity or the new self that I have, the new availability that I have. But if I've always been a helper, frequently people still like to be helpful. Um, and creating those opportunities, well, how creative can my brain be? Or is it so tired it can't? In which case, my rule is you need a roll of three so that you get to take a break and somebody else can take on that lift for a little bit. So you don't get tired of the person and you get what you need out of life too. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's so important.
That's such great advice. Judy's asking, my husband is turning 80 next week, and I noticed his memory was starting to slip. In the last year, he's been through an abundance of testing and ultimately was determined, he found out his genetic status. As well as there is plaque buildup in the brain, and the neurologist has now diagnosed him with Alzheimer's. So Judy's question is, it all seems really overwhelming, and she wants to be proactive on how to help him move forward. But, with all the information out there, like, what is your advice to her? Like, where should she start? And how do you navigate that very first stage of, now it's not, is it normal aging or something more serious? Now we know you have a diagnosis. So
Yeah.
what's the best piece
So,
of advice?
yeah. So, one of the questions I usually ask people is, so overall, how are you doing? Are you here, here, or here? And if she's saying she's pretty overwhelmed, all right, well, what are two things that are going okay for you right now? Those are called strengths. What are you feeling still good about for yourself and your relationship with your husband? And what's one you wish were different? Well, let's start there. So we want to use what you still have. Like, sort of, what are you still feeling good about? Are you guys still talking? Have you done some planning, or are you not there yet? Are you and he on the same page, or are you finding that you're moving in opposite directions about you want more data, he doesn't? Let's sort of sort out who needs what right now, because you're two different human beings who are living in a common space with a common phenomena, but you're both going to experience it really differently. So let's start with understanding where he is and where you are may be the same, or it may be really different. Let's figure that out before we move forward. Because he may have gone into the cave and going into a deep, dark place of feeling overwhelmed. I mean, or he may be fine. I don't know why you're making such a big deal of it. We got to figure that out before we can move forward, because otherwise, right away, we start to feel the tension and the distress. So I want to go to a place where somebody's going to listen to me and hear me and not try to fix me. That's my first rule. Is like, that's not about getting fixed. It's about figuring out how you're doing and what's working and what's not. And if you're feeling like it's not working, well, let's work on that. But it's not fixing something. It's really taking stock and figuring out what it is that he needs and what do you need and what do you like and what does he like. And if you
I mean,
guys are
that's
two,
like great. That's great advice for any marriage, right? So I think the pattern that is emerging here with Teepa and her expertise is really to actually not change anything around the dementia, right? So it's like, when you engage in activities, you're going to do activities maybe you enjoy, or, when you talk about, how do I talk about this? You talk about you look at your needs as well as his needs, right? And so that's a really great way of looking at it, because it takes the focus off the disease and
yeah,
more on how do we
how are we
navigate
going to
it
live?
together?
Yeah. How are we going to live our life now? Okay, so now we know we've got something. It's not fixable right now. So, all right. So, how's it interfering? But what are we still able to do? You still like hiking? Me too. Well, let's go out on a hike and we can talk while we hike, or maybe we like to be quiet and listen to the birds. Let's figure some things out so we're not really frustrated with each other. What I would say is right now, right after the diagnosis, is not the time to call the lawyer right away.
Right.
That's a little too raw and a little too like, so what are you waiting till I die? If at 80 you haven't made plans, tell you what, this is probably still not the time that it's going to suddenly be terrific to do that, because there was a reason why somebody put it off to start with. Pause
Well,
a
and
little bit before
also
you
the
go
best
there.
time actually to have those conversations are before anyone gets a
Well,
diagnosis. So
before.
you'd be having them, like, yeah. And then you avoid that awkwardness
I
100%.
was like, exactly. And that's the thing people don't think. It's like, oh, so I should have done it before. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So, okay. This is Cheryl was asking if you have any recommendations for coming up with activities for someone who has limited interest. So what if you're like, let's bake a cake together or let's do this? And they're like, nah, I don't want to.
Yeah, you're not really wanting to do that. I hear you. I'm really asking you for a big favor. I get it that you're not interested. I need to get this done and I could use some help. So I have to realize, wow, they're not, and I would say very frequently apathy, which is the inability to feel a lot of positive energy toward things, feeling like there's a reason why I should do it, versus actually depression, which might also exist. Apathy and depression are very common phenomena for people who are living with brain change. It's a chemical shift in the brain. So, me asking them to get energized for something, be really interested in something, they aren't. That's okay. I don't need you interested to start with. If I can get you interested in the act of, I'm thrilled, because it means I tricked your brain into getting engaged. And once that happened, the chemistry started changing. And it turns out for people living with dementia, physically engaging in something is the best way to treat a depression, even if you have a medication on board. If you put a medication on board and you don't do anything differently, nothing's going to change, because you have to do something to get something different to happen. But we need to be more. I know you're not really interested, Deb. I heard you. I'm asking for some help. 5 minutes and you can go sit back down. I just need help for about 5 minutes. Can you give me 5 and I'll leave you be?
So you brought up the depression factor, and I'm curious about this. We all know that social engagement is a critical. It's probably one of the best things you can do for your brain. I interviewed Dr. Claudia Calwas, who did she was doing the 90 plus study, and they've been studying people who are 90 years or older now until they depart. And I asked her, so what's the one commonality? There's people even with beta amyloid plaque in their brain who never get Alzheimer's or show symptoms of Alzheimer's. I said, what's the one consistency? And she said, 8 hours of social engagement a day. I'm like, 8 hours? Who has time to like talk to people for 8 hours? And she's like, well, what else are you going to do when you're 90 plus? And when you talk to people, you're actually using your brain, right? So
Oh
you
boy, are you ever. Yeah.
I'm listening. So my question is actually, I'm going to ask this question to you a different way. Can social engagement help people with dementia so that the symptoms are less obvious or severe? I mean, I know at times I've almost felt like when my mom's in a social situation, we've asked, like, is she actually getting better? Is that possible?
Yeah. I think when it's the right match for the person. So, like for men, I frequently find that they are watchers and sitters for a bit, and then they'll start contributing. But if you go into a social situation wanting them to initiate social interaction, so what I'll do often is I'll put up like pictures or images, and I'll look around. I have to do some homework. So I have like a PowerPoint that has all kinds of different cars on it. I say, I need some help. Um, Take a look at this model. Now, my grandson is really asking me what the model is, and I have no idea, because when he says, what's the model? I say blue. And he says, that's not what I'm asking for. So you guys here, does this look more like a Ford or a Buick? And I'll get an answer. And then pretty soon somebody will say, well, it's a 1957, blah, 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 blah. And I'll say, you're kidding me. Did you know that? Well, I had one when I was, when I was probably 15. It was the first car I ever had. And then it is. Now, where did you used to go? Out to the lake or something else? And all of a sudden, what we're getting, and these are people who may never bring up or start a conversation, but what we use is called a prop. How do I use a prop, a visual prop, an auditory prop, a history prop, something that that cohort or that individual or a group might have in common? So it does take a little extra work, but it's well worth it because all of a sudden, like, wow, talk about your synaptic connections. People are popping all over the place. And you say, could I get you something? Here, go ahead, have a drink. So they're hydrating because they're talking and their mouths are a little dry and everybody's cheers. Yeah. And what we're finding is they're starting to feel like they're in a group again. And then tomorrow they want to go back and sit in that area. Well, they don't know why they want to sit in the area, but now, oh, look, Joe's there. Now, were you the one with the car? What are you talking about? Oh, I know what he's talking about. Here, let me show you. And now this time we might look at sports teams.
Mhm.
Or we might look at, so what we're doing is sort of who's my audience? Whereas I've had women, I've gotten out old patterns, Vogue and Simplicity and Butterick, and said, oh my gosh, look at this now. Now help me out here. Did you all cut your pattern out before you put it on the fabric, or did you leave it like they had it and you just put it on the fabric? What'd y'all do? Straight pins or something else? And all of a sudden, because we have some common history, we can figure out how to access the old storage units that are locked, and suddenly they're not so locked. And what that does is use the synapses that are still available that otherwise would simply not get fired. And they're firing. And when they fire, they preserve better.
So Jill is asking about, and this is something everybody asks themselves, I think, and when a caregiver is at the point of moving their care partner to a community, can you discuss the importance of matching the living arrangement? So, for example, independent living versus assisted or memory care, to the person living with dementia's present state. Because let's face it, like, people may choose to go into assisted living a situation and they're pretty good, they don't need to be locked in memory care. So, like, what do you base that on?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. We all want our people to be the best they can be. And when we see some of the folks that are living at a certain level of ability, we say, oh, my mom's not that bad yet. And it's like, that could be, but your mom might be struggling a lot to maintain the level she's maintaining. And when we have her in assisted living versus independent, she can actually relax into assisted living because, frankly, at some point she's going to need assisted living, and it means one fewer move for her. And she could have like the ability to be, well, I'm so much better off. The number of times I've heard, I'm so glad I'm not as bad as her. Now that one I feel real bad about. But then you look and it's like, okay, have you looked in the mirror, mom? But there's no point in feeling that other than, all right, well, she's in a comfort zone of feeling better than, and she needs that right now for whatever reason. Well, this is my good friend Harriet. My name's not Harriet. It's okay. But sometimes people do better in an area where there's more demand. And that really is, you almost have to try it out a little bit to find out which works. Because sometimes it's not the people, it's how many turns and how many elevator rides do I need to get to where I eat? And how do I get to the area where they do bridge? And it starts to be about wayfinding. And for me, being in a wayfinding situation makes me not want to go because it's not about the social. It's too much. Never mind. I'll go another time. I'm not going to go now. And so I start to isolate even in a a familiar setting, quote unquote, because the setting isn't feeling so familiar. I'm having a hard time getting from place to place. And I would say nowadays, more and more retirement communities and programs will offer you the option for you to stay where you are for a while with added support.
Mhm.
Now, that gets pricey pretty quick. And it also gets dicey when they don't have the staffing that they wish they had. Um, but there are people who do quite well um, because their spouse is present. Now, what happens when the spouse isn't present? Whole nother story. But there's no rule. I would say if you're asking the question, it's time to do some deeper dive exploration of what actually does the place look like on the weekend? What does it look like in the evening? How well staffed are they? So that if my person is on that, like, we're moving toward which do we want to do? Is your mom a risk taker or is she a safety seeker? So if she likes safety, then we may want to go to the higher level of ability, skill, support, assisted living versus independent, because she keeps going around and asking people for help or, assistance, and that will get her in trouble eventually.
So, okay, that's good advice. I think it's never an easy decision, is it?
And
It's
there's no black and white. I mean, it's going to be shades of gray. As soon as you think you know exactly what you're going to do, something will happen. And it's like, okay, so much for that. Back to the drawing board. And I think as carers, we spend a lot of time back to the drawing board, plan B, plan F, and giving ourselves grace to realize this is not an exact science. And anybody who tells you it is, lying.
yeah,
It's not.
100%. Nothing. That's kind of apropos to the next question. Things happen at different stages, and it does depend a lot on individuals. But Judy's asking, does like she knows it depends on every individual, but is there any data on how long it takes before it goes to a point of things like incontinence? So I think what Judy's asking is she's the one who, is more at the beginning stage.
Yeah.
What should her expectations be for, when things start to transition?
So some of it's going to depend on who the person has always been. High detail, high control people will try to maintain control as long as possible. Now, that may mean they limit their options in other areas, like I won't go out to eat anymore. I won't do this. I won't do that because I don't want to have an accident. Other people will give up continence relatively early because, I don't care that much. I mean, so it's just a body system. Why bother? Or I don't have good sensation, or I have diabetes anyway, or, I've had 17 children or whatever it might be. I know where I came up with 17. I would anyway. I have a prolapse, and so I'm going to have leakage. And if that's the case, my desire to stay continent might be much less. But I would also say the type of dementia really matters. On average, for most dementias, unless there's a strong motor component like ALS or uh, progressive supranuclear palsy or corticobasal kind of degeneration, in general, or multi-system failure, I would say you're talking the vast majority of 8 to 10 to 12 years of being fairly continent of urine and feces. And if you see an incontinence of both, your brain should go alert, alert, something's going on here that doesn't seem right. It could be I have pressure in my brain. It could be I've had a fall that nobody noticed. Could be that I have an inflammation or an infection that's going, but that's not super common. I should lose control of my bladder first, and it should be at like nighttime or stress time or long distance time. And then that starts to be more of a pattern before I lose control of bowel for most people. Constipation, whole nother story. But so we're talking on average, first symptoms that you've noticed till we lose control. For many dementias, most people, we're talking about 8 to 10 years. I mean, it's a pretty decent distance with just maybe minor support. episodic support to it becomes a pattern where we are managing incontinence fairly consistently. And some
Yeah.
people will go up very close to the end of their disease before they were willing to let go of. Now, they may have a bladder like nobody's business, and they may run into UTIs frequently because they won't release. And some people get a neurogenic bladder, which is problematic because then they can't actively release their sphincter muscle, which really is a problem. It's like having a spinal cord injury, where you have to do in and out caths to allow the release of urine, which is pretty significant, or something else.
So
More than you wanted to know. Sorry.
yeah, no, 100%. This next question, and this is that we've had a few of these types of questions. What can you advise for handling roaming residents who show up in your loved one's room and don't want to leave?
Yeah.
We had another one with kind of like, screaming behavior and things that are really disruptive, but it's not your loved one, right? So what do
Somebody
you
else's.
do? Yeah, it's somebody else's. That can be really stressful, right? I mean,
Yeah,
my
for
guess
sure.
is you're going to
Because it's
say,
supposed to be your space. I mean,
yeah.
come on.
I
Yeah.
mean, I guess is the answer just change the environment? Like get a new
Well,
room?
the answer is what we have. If you really want them out the quickest, my experience that's worked really well is, Deborah, oh my gosh, I am so glad you showed up. I was looking for you. You know what? There was somebody else looking for you too. Tell you what, let's go down. Let me see if I can figure out who that is. Come with me. I don't want you to miss out. Somebody was looking for you. Now I don't, come with me. Let's go this way. And I come up and I do hand under hand and we go look for who was looking for you. And I say, Mary, you're one of the folks that works here. I know that, it was looking for, someone was looking for her. Could you help her out? She was in my mom's room, and I think she just might have come to visit, but we were already visiting.
Then you shut the door and lock it, or like,
Then I shut the door and basically, or say, hey, mom, do you want to go someplace else?
right,
Because, I
out
think
of
she
the
might be coming
situation.
back. Let's go
Right.
find a new place to be. Because often what we're doing is sounding like we're having a good time.
Right.
We forget we are a piece of the environment that can be really stimulating when we're visiting and we're laughing and I'm showing mom stuff. It's like she's bored and she's lonely. He's lonely, he's bored, and it looks interesting. We sound interesting. And so, I mean, the other option is decide I'm going to share myself with more than just my mom. But let's do it in the common space, not in my mom's space, or my dad's, or
Yeah.
yeah.
That's such
Um,
great advice.
I mean,
That's
it's a choice. I know it's a choice. And I know sometimes you're like, I just want to visit my mom. And it's like,
yeah.
I get it. Um, I guess the person that keeps coming in doesn't get the visits they want, makes it really hard for them. But I would also say the screaming, one of the reasons that people scream is they're not getting their needs met or they're overwhelmed. And so we could look at the environment and go, is the environment sort of getting overwhelming? Like, I can think of places I've been where they have the music cranked up, they have the workers busy, everybody's doing stuff. The place is like, whoa, they've got everybody out of their room. And it's like, and it looks like Harriet should probably not be in this space right now. And it's like, I can't help Harriet, but maybe I could say, would you guys mind turning down the volume a little bit? It's a little loud.
Mhm.
So I can take responsibility maybe for seeing if I can bring some other elements down and maybe it helps. Of course, my behavior would be totally different than most people's.
So, well, I'm going to ask you this question another way because it's happened to a friend of ours. Her mom is in assisted living and like loving it, having a great time. She has a boyfriend, and they have a very sweet relationship. And she got a call from the, from the
Family of the boyfriend.
well, yeah, because they're sleeping in the same bed now, and they're like, "Is that okay?" And she's like, "Of course it's okay. Like, I almost don't want to know about that, you
Yeah.
know." But what about that? I mean, that does raise a point. Like, there are parents in most of
Yeah.
these occasions, or maybe it could be a spouse, which is very
Yeah. That's
possible.
really hard for spouses for sure.
Really hard, like to think
Super
about.
hard. Yeah.
So what do you do in those situations? Is it natural to say, okay, they're making this person happy, or should we separate them? Like, how do you even
Yeah.
how do you even with good intention make that decision?
So one of the things we never talk about in our advanced directives is what if I ever get dementia and I have a new relationship with somebody, um, I want to be able to do that because I'm a risk taker and I'm willing to take those risks. We never have that conversation. We're worried about how am I going to die? Are you going to let me eat or you want me to eat or whatever? We don't think, how am I going to live? What are the possibilities for living? And it's like, wow, okay, so how much does this person love being touched and love being hugged and love being held? How many years did they sleep in a bed with somebody else? How many years have they been alone? How comfortable were they being alone? Were they really anxious at night? Well, if that's the case, then I am really in support of cuddle, cuddle, and have some time. But is that going to be hard? Yeah, we need to talk through that. We need to process through it. Um, you don't need to be exposed to it. I can make sure that when you come in to visit, if I'm a staff member, that what we have as mom and the friend in different spaces are sitting at the table having ice cream. I can take some responsibility. What I'm going to ask you to do is call me and let me know you're coming so that I can make sure that if it's really bothering you, you know the value of it, but you don't want to see it, then you don't have to see it. It's one of the reasons that I'm here is to make sure your life is okay about this too. We
Can
want to
you
work this out.
Can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that need to develop those close friendships and
Yeah.
affections when you have dementia? Like, tell us a little bit so that we
Yeah.
can understand
I'm
more.
really lonely. I don't understand why everybody's moving away from me. Nobody, I've actually, and very frequently, people are no longer as aware of their mouths and halitosis and aware of their fingernails and the aware of their hair. And as you said, your mom used to dress to the nines, and now it's like, she doesn't really care all that much. And so finding somebody who doesn't care either and still sees me as this amazing human being, and I still have friends. I like having friends. I've always liked having friends. I like people when I go, you go, oh, back and we give a hug. Humans need human connection. Now, for intellectuals, it's chatting at each other. But for physicality people, it's being physical with each other. And that doesn't mean having sex. I mean, I want to really discriminate between the number of people who really are not interested in sex. They're interested in cuddling, they're interested in connection, they're interested in hugging, holding hands, sitting together, leaning into each other. I need other, I need another human being with me. It's been my whole life versus I've been a loner my whole life. Give me space. I don't want people on top of me. I want my chair over against the wall so I can watch everybody and I can wave at them and I can greet them, but I don't have to talk to them unless I want to. Um, so I think we need to continue to have that range of being human that we've always had, and respect it. But if I'm changing, we also need to respect that. What's tricky is when somebody wants something that the other human being doesn't want, then we do have to look at how can we create space for that person who doesn't want that, and how do we provide that human being with what they're looking for but not giving them over to the ability to hurt someone else or intensely do things with the other person they're not interested in. And that doesn't mean as a carer, I have to expose myself to that either. I would encourage family members to be thoughtful, like spouses particularly. I'm not enjoying sex anymore. We need to talk about that because if the person living with dementia is trying to seek that relationship and you're not enjoying it and they're not picking up on the cues, we've got to figure that out before this goes too far. We do not want that letting that get out of control because that's not a habit structure that will be well managed in residential care. So we want to start figuring it out before too long. What else
Yeah,
can we do?
yeah. It's complicated, but
It
at
is
the end of the
complicated.
day, everyone's human, right? It's like human
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
normal in
It's
in
normal stuff, but and again, it gets that weird flavor to it, but it is that desire to be seen as having value.
yeah, yeah. Definitely. So, Teepa, I have a question just to kind of wrap this up. Is there anything where, because I mean, I feel like you have the answers to everything, and I always feel so much better talking to you because what you say makes so much sense. It's like, and if we all can just look in at dementia in the lens of we're human, right? And so use human strategies. It's like what we did, those of us who are parents, what we did when our kids, we were trying to negotiate with our kids. They're humans who are developing. Now we're kind of doing the reverse, but they're still human, right? And understanding that. But my question to you is there anything you haven't really been able to solve where you think, wow, this is a really tricky one?
The most challenging situations right now have to do with resource allocation, and that the number of people available to provide support with skill is nowhere near the number that are needed. And the number of situations where a skilled person would make all the difference in someone's life is huge, and it's growing. And we keep thinking, well, maybe there'll be technology or maybe there'll be a cure. And my idea is, well, that's a great hope. But for tomorrow, I think maybe people may want to become a little more skillful, because I think there's going to be a window of time for quite some time where we're going to need more skilled people than we have. And we're not going to be able to find them if we don't step forward and say, okay, give me some skills, let me figure it out. Because I'm seeing more and more situations where they're trying to find carers, trying to find the person that's going to be a right match. It's taking much longer. And in some cases, we haven't found them.
So how do you find, I mean, we're blessed. My sister and I are blessed that we have a wonderful caregiving team for my
Yeah.
parents. But there's a lot of people who aren't that lucky, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what is your recommendation to them? Like, what should people consider when looking for assistance? What are the, like, give us the cheat sheet and give us some ideas of what are some maybe innovative solutions around that?
Yeah. So some of the places that we've started looking is, let's look for students who are looking to go into health careers, who need some time with people to see like what their skill sets are, and they need some funding. So if you have a little bit of money, maybe they're the group to go with. And so community colleges, universities, Care Yaya is a group that does this kind of thing. Looking at older adults who have lost their partner. This is Teepa having to deal with
I was like, Teepa, we're losing you. Where'd you
I
go?
know it's called a motion sensor, and I've got a little alcove and it leans over to, it's like, oh my heavens, how irritating, but how real. So, what I would say, the places to hunt for people is people who've retired already. Um, and they would like to make a little money. They don't want a lot, but we've got to put programs together and putting together people. I think bringing people into community is really important. Like, we can all hang out together for a day and there's a bathroom there. I'm not going to call it adult day health because people don't need to get that involved. What we need is a program where people can come and hang out. And we used to do that at senior centers. But now there's like high school where there's cliques. And it's like, I got to find the right clique for my people to be in. And then I've got to find the right people to be interested in being with them in that clique. But I think we have a long way to go.
There's a
So
great model out of Japan where they put the senior center in the middle of town and everything runs through that. So the kindergarten and, the
yeah,
activities.
intergenerational. Yeah.
Yeah, which is an amazing, amazing
A soup
solution.
kitchen. I mean, we have folks who are running a soup kitchen in one of the locations, and they're the ones running the soup kitchen. People with dementia are running the soup kitchen, but it gives them a sense of value and purpose, and it takes fewer people to help support, and people are getting fed.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. Well, Teepa, as always, we love having you and thank you. I really feel like you give the best advice out there. You always make me feel better. So that's important with care. And we thank you so much for your
You
time.
are so welcome, and thank you for everything you're doing at making the knowledge and the wisdom available. And I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about the other work that you do. So thank you, Deb.
Thank you. If you missed any of this interview, don't forget to go to beingpatient.com. This is when we tell you when we get to interview people like Teepa for you to join us. Thanks everybody for watching, and send us any ideas you may have for future talks. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you to Teepa, and thanks for watching. Bye.
Thank you.